Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Hendersonville, North Carolina. I'm Ron Parton, a member of your worship team. I welcome you today. We're also glad to have back Reverend Don Rollins, our interim minister. I think you'll enjoy his message. Today's opening words are from Reverend Elizabeth Mount, who serves our UU congregation in Indiana, Pennsylvania. Come into this place, bringing all you hold with you. Though your heart be heavily burdened, whether you be on the brink of tears or burn with unquenchable rage, this community can hold you and your strongest emotions. Yes, even the messy ones are welcome here. Come in. If you sing just a little too loud, if you hold still as statues and just breathe it in, if you sway with the music, moving your soul, you are welcome. Come in and say amen when the Spirit moves you. Tell that preacher to preach. Yes, that's right. Tell us. Or close your eyes and quietly let your mind float free on the blessed words. Come into this place with every piece of yourself gathered up, and let us be the church incarnate. Let us bring forth the spirit of all that we love by the words of our mouths and the doing of our hands as we make sacred this time together.
That was professional. Hello, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to our online service for the week of Sunday, August 23rd. If you're with us for the first time, my name is Don Rollins, and I serve as the accredited interim minister to the fellowship. I'm assisted by my spouse and director, Mary Bracy. There you go. Well, I hope everybody's who's watching today will identify with some piece or more of what I have for you. This week's message is really designed for the congregation I'm serving. And we're looking at the interim period and just kind of asking some questions and thinking about what it is to get ready for a new settled minister. So, and we're doing this because so much of our work that we began a year ago has been altered or altogether suspended by the coronavirus. But of course, the clock is still ticking as we walk this path together. So let's talk about interim work, specifically how a 21st century Unitarian Universalist congregation gets ready to return to settled ministry. And here's a short text for us to use as a touchstone. It comes to us from the author Sarah Miles' book, Jesus Freak. She tells us, church is actually a place for people to experience we, to be knocked around in the great tumbler of the church with people I didn't choose, because left to my own devices, I'm going to choose people like me. His name was Steve. They called him Moose. And by the time he signed up for my 8th grade basketball team, he was a mostly lean 6'2", 205 pounds, and strong. Reliable sources swore that he once lifted the rear end of an '82 Chevette. And sure, Moose was on his second tour of the 8th grade. But when was the last time you chinned an intact automobile? On paper, that kid was a two-sport athlete, football and basketball. But in reality, when Moose came off the bench, it was pretty much football without the pads and the helmet. Hand to God, he was the only player I ever coached who averaged a foul per minute. And given that Moose could rebound but not shoot, I taught him to always initiate contact before going to the hoop. Step into your man, fling those bricks you call jump shots, make them foul you, and take your chances at the free throw line. The odds will be better. And it worked, kinda. Like I say, Moose was never in the game for more than a total of 5 minutes, but during that interval, he drew at least as many fouls as he inflicted. He'd just catch the ball, put his head and shoulder in some gangly mother's child that was guarding him, and make the ref decide who fouled who. And with this strategy, he might have led the team in scoring had he not been cursed with the shooting touch of a grenade launcher. But I stuck with the plan. I worked with Moose on free throw form and follow through. Take a breath, tune out the crowd, think of yourself as being on a mission. And your mission is not just to put the ball over the rim and through the hoop. Your mission is to become Moose, the free throw machine, the ice water in the veins, game on the line, go-to guy when we needed to tie. Take your time, Moose. Catch your breath. Remember your mission. To wind up this story, I became awed by Moose. And if only for those dazzling moments on the court, he really was my spiritual guide, and he was my church consultant. For when I asked my young charge if he knew what I meant about the mission thing, I got the furrowed brow of a sweet child living in a grown man's body. Is it like a dream, Coach? Is a mission thing like a dream that you think is going to happen? Now, friends, live long enough and you too will accumulate silly, sacred moments that you know in a second you're going to carry with you until the end. Those are our sacred flashes in time. As the hymnist put it, just too simple a thing to be tried as truth. Something like standing in a beat-up gym with a poor hill country kid who just became the teacher and you the pupil. The mission is a dream you know will really happen. Cerebral friends in this liberal faith, what else do we need to know about mission than that? Hendersonville beloveds, we've shared that story before. That's because we've been working hard at this interim thing. Nearly half of it online now. Governance models, best practices, communication, worship, music, membership, money, staffing, pastoral care and counseling, justice and service work, anti-oppression, anti-white supremacy. But critical as all these things are in a postmodern, nearly post-denomination age, the goal of our shared ministry is to get ready to get ready. It's been about holding up a mirror so you might examine what is and then deciding what may be. To put it differently, it's about getting ready to be a worthy partner for a worthy settled minister. It's about looking inside before you start looking outside. Here's a trade secret for you. Often as not, when interim ministers get together for training and support, a fair number of us are fried. So much of what we do is behind the scenes, and on top of the public stuff like preaching and pastoral care and justice work, it's just good to be among folks who know what it is to live that way. We get one another. When we met last April, a small subgroup got to talking about the funkiest holy unions. Those were the pre-marriage equality ceremonies we performed. The funkiest holy unions and weddings we've ever done. We talked about the elegant ones. We talked about the boring ones. Talked about the goofy ones, the funky ones. Speaking to the latter, my favorites have been three kinds of weddings: pagan weddings, Appalachian weddings, and biker weddings. Nothing like a preacher wearing, per the bride and groom's heartfelt pleas, a leather jacket, riding pants, and spiked helmet. I just said that on the internet. I'm not sure where it came from or why, but when meeting with those couples that I enjoyed so much, I meet with them ahead of time. I began each session with a simple, but I think it's important question. And that is, what's in it for the other person? For real, what do you have to give, not get? Forget about that for a minute. Think about what you have to offer. Good folk who are invested in this or another religious community, good matches between ministers and congregations are rarely happenstance. From what I've seen, like the couples whose rituals I've helped create, It's about both parties doing the daunting and fearless work of looking first at themselves. Something like getting ready, introspection, to get ready, the actual search process for a new relationship. So one of the questions I want you to think about, folks, whether you're part of the congregation or not, is what is it that you have to offer the world? What is it that you have to give and not get? And with that in mind, I want to talk with you a little bit about what I have seen in vital congregations over the years as they do their interim introspection. Here's a few things I want to run by you, kind of a partial list of what I think works best in these congregations that I've seen. Number one, they live by an internalized, not just on paper, covenant that sets specific standards for how to act when things get messy, because we know they will. And back to the excerpt I read from Sarah Miles, entering into a community means giving up some measure of autonomy for the sake of participating in that group. It means giving up some measure of autonomy for the sake of a shared set of values. It's moving from me to us, maybe even to the us with folks I don't always like. But it's about making promises. It's about making promises with ourselves before we ever make them to each other. Stuff like speaking to rather than about each other. Listening, which is a difficult art. Assuming good intention, speaking for oneself, thinking collectively and futuristically, rather than just the tyranny of the now. I watch those congregations set boundaries, and for sure they laugh whenever possible. For those congregations, deciding how to be together in rough times is the first step in getting ready to get ready. Second, vital congregations study other vital congregations and organizations. They have a culture of curiosity, a culture of adventure. They shamelessly poach ideas and practices and possibilities from someplace else. And yes, they're connected to our Unitarian Universalist Association, enlarging their sense of community and their place in the world. Frank O'Connor was an Irish poet and a storyteller from the last century. He was also a true adventurer. When hiking across the moors of his home country, he quickly learned how difficult it would be to scale the hedgerows and the orchard walls. So each time he was confronted with a barrier, he took off his prized hat and he threw it over. And that way he'd have to follow. For these vital congregations, trying new stuff, taking chances is the norm. To borrow from the congregational studies, folks, these are vital communities not afraid to fail. Third, vital congregations recognize the life cycles every congregation experiences, and they don't freak out. I once served a UU congregation in the South that had been experiencing financial freefall for 6 years. The reasons were many, most of them really beyond the congregation's control. And each board meeting was visited with anxiety and confusion. Now, soon after I arrived, the board called a final budget meeting, knowing more cuts were necessary before going to the whole church for approval. But when the board gathered to begin that process, they covenanted to practice radical hospitality for the tough calls they were going to have to make. Nobody made them serve on that board. They stepped up because they thought they had something to give. And so to a person, they talked about a covenant, and it ended up with this. We're not going to use the phrase, we can't afford it. We're going to own up. We're going to use the phrase, we choose to make that hard decision, and here's how it's going to go. Do you hear the difference? We can't afford it versus let's step up and say we've got some work to do. So those vital congregations understand without freaking out that things change over time. Things happen we never saw coming. Some of them are blessings that we celebrate. Some of them are trials to be endured. That slight change they made, that board, It signaled to members and friends their leadership would be accountable for their actions. More importantly, accountable to and guided by the values in their new mission statement. That board could have lost it. They could have freaked. They could start blaming each other. They could start protecting their particular committees or programs or silos. Instead, they put their values first. They stayed centered, and they normalized the ups and downs of congregational life. So vital congregations are value-driven because once chosen and internalized, those values gives focus and direction in both the valleys and on the peaks. Lastly, vital congregations are outwardly facing, always asking who and what is calling them to action now. I also use this story when we were meeting in the flesh, but I think you'll agree with me, it's worth a second hearing. It comes from Noah Ben Shay's wonderful little book, Jacob the Baker. Jacob the Baker has become the village's unofficial rabbi as well as a baker because over time people realize he has wisdom. So they began seeking him out, not only for food for the body, for sustenance for the soul. In turn, Jacob seems surprised by his emerging gifts. He's a baker, not a teacher, but still the people come. Now the story begins. A man who appeared to be a mason from the crusts of dried cement on his shirt waited patiently one day for a chance to speak with Jacob. The man's voice was gruff, but not his manner. Jacob, all my life I have made homes for others, and now I am preparing to build a home for myself. Do you have any suggestions? Jacob laughed. Who was Jacob the baker to mix mortar and make bricks? But then Jacob raised his left index finger as if touching an old memory, and waved it in the air, suggesting there was maybe one thought he could offer. It says in our books, in order for a house to be a house, it must have a window and a door. The smile climbed the man's face. Jacob, this much even I know. Those behind the man chuckled as well. But Jacob continued as if he didn't hear their laughter. Do you know why I think a house must have a window as well as a door? Suddenly it became very quiet again. My house must have a door so I can enter myself, and a window so I can see beyond myself. And if it doesn't, asked the man, and now a great sadness rolled its shadow across Jacob's face. The words came slowly. You must remember, said Jacob, the only difference between a house and a coffin is a window. As recently as 5 years ago, who could have presaged the country and the world outside wherever you're watching today's broadcast? The cause for equality has been revived in many ways we haven't witnessed since the late John Lewis was learning the art of getting into good trouble. But as you know, the cost has been great, and the work is far from over. COVID or not, bellies are still empty. White supremacy still rages. The pandemic itself is taking lives. And yes, an inept administration is still in power. We've made great progress. We have come to the surface in so many ways in the last few months. And yet I look at vital congregations in the literature as well as with colleagues. And I wonder what it is that animates them during this time. Where is the power for them, those congregations, just have a buzz about them, despite where we are with the COVID? And what I'm learning is those vital congregations are not overwhelmed by the forces of evil all around. They can thus discern the optimal places to use their resources. They know the power of numbers, the power that comes of doing things together they cannot do apart. They become a voice in the community as never before. And they take the flack. Flack sometimes from within their own ranks for having windows and not just doors. Folks, I could keep on going here. I am a church geek, congregational geek. This stuff actually interests me. And the field of congregational studies is almost 40 years in the making, so there's lots of stuff out there that entertains me and challenges me. Because along with congregations that are vital, I seek to be a minister that brings vitality as well. So we really are in this together as we try to minister to a broken world. So those are the things I know about vital congregations right now. And I want to leave off where we started with Moose, the defensive tackle who played basketball as he did football. Fast forward a couple years after that story, I'm at the public swimming pool in my native Oak Hill, Ohio, catching a few laps during Adult Swim. And then I am attacked by a force, actually attacked by a moose. Lifted almost out of the water, tossed a good 5 feet in the air, and convinced I'd just been bitten by the only shark to live in chlorinated confines. Instead, there was Moose, laughing, celebrating the look on my face. After releasing 2 quarts of water I'd consumed, congratulating him for an absolutely stellar stunt, he gave me a big moose hug. And he, swear to God, asked me, how's that for a mission? Postscript. Turns out Moose was still a year shy of qualifying for Adult Swim. That was a factor I pointed out to the lifeguard that made him sit under the chair until the age ban was over. So there you have it, folks. Some reflections about what congregations are about and some reflections from a little country kid that I think is still truthful. Thanks for listening.
We close our gathering with a benediction from UU minister Cynthia Landrum. We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection. Our concerns, our care for each other, our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, friends, be strong, be well, be true, be loving.